Leviticus 25. And I'm going to take it back to the land, where the land was given back in Jubilee to the people. And we're going to commentate on what this means present in ruthless conditions dealing with housing, 2021, July 29.
And verse 1, this is one of the prophecies that relate to the Messiah. He should announce a release to the captives. It's also fulfilled in the life of Jesus in Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19. So you might want to see that as a messianic typology in this chapter. When it says, each of you shall return to his own property, one of the purposes of the year of Jubilee is that there be no landed aristocracy in Israel. That every 50 years the land would automatically revert to the original tribal ownership. As you know, the land was divided among the tribes by lot, and every tribe received a certain part. Every 50 years they were to go back to that original tribal allocation, and every slave was to return to their own family or be released. This was the humanitarian purpose, to help the debtors get a fresh start, and not to develop a rich class and a poor class among the people of Israel. And I think you can see the purpose there.
And the rich class and poor class would be by interest, right? A compound interest or forever debt. So creating a forever debt situation would be using the person to be bound to you. Hello, banks got bailed out, but yet we see landowners wanting their payment from the government, but the banks are quiet. Well, they could just ease off of the homeowners, right? And yes, they need the money, but what are the banks threatening to foreclose? So what about 2008 when they got bailed out and used the so-called brother to do it? Really? Like he had money to bail something out. To bail bank. When did black people bail private banks out? When? Anywhere in history? Yeah, so especially banks from the West, from Europe. Banks here established. Never. Matter of fact, those banks were made by the sweat and blood of slaves. That's when the finances worldwide from Europe got strengthened with the plundering of all the products that was taken from conquest. So when we look at that, now, but yet, here's the brother bailing them out. And what do? Put pressure on the owners now, even though it's a world epidemic. And not a shot fired against them by the media, of course not. We look at the landowners crying, on TV. But the reality is the bank could just ease off and not put the pressure. Owners, of course, got in a situation, people lost their jobs. It is what it is. But remember, for the poor, it's going to cost them 2.5 to 3 times the amount they must have as an income. You know how people going to get done on that one? To even get in an apartment of a private owner. What's the waiting list? Probably thousands of evictions ahead, and most waiting lists are closed on subsidized housing in many states because they're full. So, got a housing problem straight up. California's throwing $10 million at their situation, but here the tribes kept the land in making sure that the tribe had land. That's why in Joshua 1, the tribe of Gad, Manasseh, tribe of Reuben had their land on one side, but they were commanded to help their brothers get their lands. God's intention was that you have your land, and even if it gets in debt, it goes back. Debts are forgiven. Jubilee. When Jesus came and declared it, your sins are forgiven. It had nothing to do with land. It had to do with your sins is forgiven, and you can receive the Holy Spirit, so you can be fair. So you can practice righteousness and what's just. But nevertheless, we miss that one and try to run ahead. And guess what? We're stewards over the land. And to crush the poor and the needy, Micah 1212, is a crime at this time. To say, to not make housing affordable for people that might be disabled on Social Security or anything like that. They make $1,000. If the rent is $1,500 average, two-unit thing, let's say. Okay, so you got to make $4,500 in many cases. That's just 2.5, something like that. Some, if the rent is any more than that, two-bedroom average in Citrus Heights goes for almost $1,700. So now you're talking, what do you got to have to move in that zip code? The Social Security lady got to have, let's see, she's paying $2,000 a month, just about, let's say, with utilities and everything. The rents, let's push the rent to $2,000. Okay, Bay Area. Let's take it. Well, $2,500 will buy you a place down Los Angeles, whatever. 3 times the amount. Really, $7,500. 3 times the amount. So if it's $2,500, yeah, that's a lot of money a month. Then times 12. So you way up here at $60,000, $70,000 incomes. They'll never get house. See? So Christian Judea believing nation here, God intended the tribes to be having their own land. It goes back to the land. Banks don't get to keep it. Developers, whatever, just don't go over there and touch land unless you pay them. See, that's how it looks today. So we don't have it. We have a capitalist society. Okay? And if they did capitalism on each other, brother, there was a time when you just had to let it go. That means land goes back to each tribe. So each people would have their land. And they would be a witness to the corrupt pagan worshipers that covet land, take land, murder for land, minerals and resources. It would be a light to them that we treat each other with equal value, each tribe. Same care. Joshua 1, they had to help their brethren. Read it. The tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, who already had their Cadillac and their big house on this side of Jordan. So they had to help them or be put to death. That's a strong covenant. Covenant strong as death. Phileo. You know, with all reciprocity. We helped you get yours, you help us. That's not in our society. Not at all. The banks, we help bail them out with our taxes. They're not going to help the landlords that's screaming bloody murder, waiting on the federal government to come. But the real pressure is coming from the mortgages, which is the banks, and I said it. However, we can answer those problems by simply understanding Jubilee, the cancellation of debts, and that is a necessity for many people, like it is eating breakfast. My suggestion to churches, especially out in America, right? If you're in the hoods, African American hoods, I'm talking to them because they way behind. And anybody else out there, you better help each other, man. Help get your credit scores right. Help each other with down payments on your for your house. You know, you're gonna have to really help each other, man. You better be teaching that in the pulpits. You know, don't tell them just put money in a bucket and everything's gonna be all right. Praise their way through it. That has its place. But we're going to have to get real and honest now dealing with money. You hear what I'm saying? Because it is over the next 10 years with this inflation and stuff, it's getting real serious now. No more church games. No more. We're going to have to get real with money. Here we're talking about the land goes back to the original owner. You heard it out of the horses. So then what does that mean? That means debt free, man. Okay, so we got to help each other with credit scores. And many of the believers, be responsible and go do all your homework on how to really get a house. The preacher don't told you now. You don't pay your tithe, gave your offering. Now go out there and talk to some people that can tell you how to get set up if he's not going to tell you. To receive your ownership and then share. That would be my suggestion to you. That way we don't get caught up in the survival rat race. Crabs crawling out of the barrel. And forget our brother and become comfortable. When they violated these land laws, it was what caused them to go into captivity. Later on, the scholar said they fenced it out. Every nation that had these boundaries like that, you can't touch the fruit on that tree, but at four corners of every field, the poor can eat. You think they were idiots? You think there was a welfare check coming? People had to eat. Necessities seemed like to be God's priority. Two things. Goes back to the original tribe that way. These people, so it would look like this: black people have their ownerships, right? White people have their ownerships, Indians have their ownerships, and so forth, and so on. If you're going to divide it in tribes, that America would look like this. Biblical proportion, which we say we have biblical faith. Ain't no sense in blessing Israel and you don't practice what they were commanded in a practical sense. Especially giving God praise and glory by this experiment of giving, 2 Corinthians 9, cause not only meets the needs and necessities of the saints, but causes many praises. God to be glorified of our sincerity in the gospel. We're not in this to try to gain something just for one person. It has to be for the collective. It has to be publicly displayed. Look, this nation operates like they got each other's back dealing with land. Start off with Joshua 1 again. Look at this. Look how they take care of each other. It's a light to them. Instead of plundering, murder, manipulating, being deceitful, handling the gospel deceitfully. Look at the Catholic Church of Belgium and what happened in Congo. 20 million minuses. Look, bro, we've seen enough of any leader in a suit, no matter who they are, of just, at the end, making excuses for not getting the job done. Dope is still pouring into my hoods, right over the border, guns and drugs. And for that means, sending in the feds on top, yes, you got to send them in and stop the guns, but listen, everyone there, go sit the president there, and then he walk to the store, he's going to have a gun. Common sense. And then guess what's going to happen? Guns and drugs are going to destroy many more families. Oh yeah, prophesied, man. It's going to happen. The feds are already going into Chicago, San Francisco as we speak, and LA and New York. Now, with that said, what are we going to do to shine the light to the hoods? Well, we can witness to the loved ones in our local congregations. We can be able to communicate, be ready to distribute. As far as what people might in reality be going through, who support our local churches. And we cannot act like Deuteronomy 14:15, Deuteronomy 26, Malachi 3:10, 11. Now catch that, Old Testament. For the will of the Father, the stranger, and the poor among us. Come on. How much more for the household of faith? Now I'll jump to the New Testament. You got 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 and Acts 4:32 and a couple other accounts on giving. But bottom line is all giving. So giving is not bad. Giving is good. Giving manifests the goodness of God, the mercy of God. So I suggest that you guys in collective groups begin to prepare for helping each other with debts, helping each other with your credit, helping each other to make sure roofs are over your head. And if you have the power in your hand, begin to think of ownership as far as real estate, condos, things like that, to buffet the banks, the bullies, the ones that got bailed out with your tax dollars, who putting pressure on landlords to kick your poor brothers out into the streets. Woe to the Christians who don't communicate and know they about to put a believer out. Now, to those that have waited and been patient, I definitely understand. I empathize with you 100% for the usury of those that have youth who got unemployment and should have paid. But to those that are brethren who cannot find work right now, you're a property owner. You don't have to. But just a suggestion. Of course, you're free to make your choices. No condemnation. It's our culture. But communicate and be ready to distribute. If a person is there and they can't find a job, and ask them. If you find out they're a believer, that's your brother of the household. So if you're going to practice Judea, you might have to cancel their debt. Would you be willing to obey God in that? In the practical, in the logos? If you understand, God don't want you to do something for somebody, he'll stop you. Because we have this custom of be warm, be filled. These guys work hard mentality. When people working 3 and 4 jobs and still they can't make that cut. to get $1,000 apartment, they're not making $3,000 before taxes. Right, they work at Walmart and at McDonald's. What about your brothers in that who bring 10% to the church? Now, you think we're going to get a pass? We're not. Every idle word and every scripture that showed us to discern, communicate, and be willing to help our brother with mercy, no matter how our systems are set up, we will lose ground, we'll lose the impact of our sincerity of the gospel by the love that we show for one another, genuine love and not talk, not song. It's an actual lifestyle of practice. And those that have more than what they need, like the manna fell, Paul argued, they have extras for others that might have need of necessity when the manna fell. I got 5 kids. You can't take what would belong to my 5 kids. God is feeding us now. So you can't take that and go sell the chicken on the corner and do capitalist thing. So it turned to worms if they got more than what they needed. They couldn't sell it. So bottom line was, the point of the lesson Paul argues in 2 Corinthians 8 is that there be equality. That's all. Same care. You may not have the same thing, but same care about the necessities. Do you want your necessities met? Yes. Do I? Yes. The only way to love our neighbors ourselves is to have that concept, and especially if we call ourselves brother in our family, we must live different. That's why the land went back. So all the necessities of housing and food and clothing would be a testimony, because their clothes never wore out when they came out of Egypt. In other words, God provides where he guides. So if God is guiding the church and you say we are the collective group and God is guiding us, well, now, to not deal with provision is insanity. To say, put it in a bucket, which is the custom, and God will provide. And be warm and be filled, and if there be any believer among us that there's a true necessity, and we're not being true to the gospel, there's no proof of our sincerity to the gospel, so then, of course, they're blowing their brains out in Chicago. Churches on every corner. Maybe they don't like our system, which they've told me for 40 years. We don't like our system. Because they're watching their relatives and they see the love that we have for one another. They see by our demonstration. If their mother go through some stuff and we're not there, they see every bit of everything that's going on. We act like their relatives aren't the sinners that's blowing their brains out. You can't cover oppression. You can't cover covetousness. Go ask Achan. He couldn't cover it. It always comes out, especially when it's dealing with things. Achan covered a mantle, Achan covered a piece of gold, and it cost 37 men to die. And Israel lost heart after they came into conquest after Jericho, caused them to lose heart. One man touching something God said don't touch. Can't just have everything you want. Sorry, Daddy was wrong. To the women and to the men. Let's listen to the clip.
36:9, we have the idea about returning to our own family. In Isaiah chapter 5, verse 8, we see that a rich class did develop in Israel that tried to put land to land and vineyard to vineyard.
And they went into captivity when they tried to put land to land and vineyard to vineyard. Remember, it was open land, right? When you see the fences here in this country, that is the opposite practice. It took Israel down. It brought covenants of land, and I ain't sharing nothing with nobody ever. I don't have to. I live in a capitalistic, just where we live to get over somebody. Man, this is so anti-Hebrew, bro. What we rocking with here with capitalism, just look at what's going on now.
Problems, as it has in every country in the world where greed has dominated human need. Now, notice we mentioned, let's get down to verse 18 if I could. So you shall thus observe my statutes, keep my judgments, so as to carry them out, that you may live securely in the land. Now in chapter 26, verses 3 through 13, the blessings of keeping God's law are specifically delineated, and you might want to see that next chapter. The blessings for observing this would be that God would provide peace and security in the promised land. Notice what it mentions in verse 20.
Notice it didn't happen.
What are we going to eat on the seventh year if
Wonder
we do not
why.
sow or gather in our crops? Here's the very utilitarian attitude of man that says, what are we going to eat, God? Well, I think the same attitude is picked up on when Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 6, verses 19 through 34, talks about the lilies of the field, the birds of the air, being anxious for your lifespan, being anxious what you shall eat, what you shall wear. And the implication of that is you trust God first, He'll provide all the rest you need. That's exactly what this is talking about, and may have been the background for Jesus' statement there. Notice it says in verse 21, and so I will order my blessings for you in the 6th year, that it will bring forth the crops for 3 years. Now people who have a closed system of natural law and do not allow a personal sovereign God to intervene in His creation will find it very hard to believe that every 6 years there was a huge bumper crop. And yet those of us who believe in a personal God, who stands by His word and blesses His children when they obey, will have no problems in believing this, because the crop was directly to the rain, and God, of course, is the provider of the rain. Verse 23, the land, moreover, shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, God says, for you are but aliens and sojourners with me. In reality, all the possessions of man belong to God, and we are stewards of them, and God needs to bring that home to our mind.
Now, stewardship means we give an account. So, if you put your poor brother out and he was working poor, he can't afford, if you raise the rents to 2.5 to 3 times the amount, talking to Christians now, believers, disciples, and followers of Jesus Christ, and the poor, and you know that people with Social Security and disability and people in your congregation may have situations, but if you allow the ironclad steel, San Quentin sitting, Architrash steel iron gate soul prison runner to operate your property management and never know, they can treat harshly the person who is the believer. Yes, put them on the street or deny them. Now, putting them on the street, whatever, it's your call, brother. But here, as far as letting them in, really, you have nothing for the poor? Nothing. Really. And you're a Christian and you're a capitalist. Correct? And you've had success and you got properties. Really? Well, dude, all that money you get don't mean nothing if you drop dead right now. You can't take it with you, man. Do what the word says. You see, they practice God's intention was you're a steward over my stuff. Now, you don't oppress your brother or the stranger. You got to deal with that, man. I'm dealing with oppression now. No condemnation for me, of course, brother. You're my brother, and I'm not here to judge you. Just thought I'd be your best friend.
In reality, we can't buy and sell land permanently even today. For when a man dies, it passes to his children. But in reality, the land belongs to God. No one owns anything. We are simply stewards. And the unfortunate nature of our society is that people too often are treated as means to an end, not people as the priority in all the world. Things are not the priority. People are the priority.
As we can see now, how far are we with low-income apartment complexes that normally go for $500 are now boosted up to $1,200, $1,000, right? And the normal people they rent to is people disabled and have Social Security. We're talking about what should be low income. Developers have built nothing for them. So now, guess what? If they don't have like 3 times the amount of that $1,000, $1,000, 3 times 2.5, brother, they can't get in. Okay, so do we call that, what kind of stewardship is that? Is that bad or good? You tell me. Is it good fruit or rotten fruit? Is that praise to God back after delivering us from a world plague? Is that how we glorify God? Do the banks glorify God by putting pressure on the people, on the landowners right now? Come on, bro. This is our praise. This is our, no, that's the kingdoms of this world's praise. So church, be the opposite. Be the opposite. If they taken, we be given. We be building complexes for our seniors, for our disabled, for our poor people that tie to our local churches, man. It's the decent thing. Or help them in the necessities. We put it at the state and the federal government who's subject to bail out all this money printed, do our job. It's simple like that.
Now it says here that we are aliens and sojourners with God. That's a beautiful statement. And not only are we...
So, in conclusion, God brought them out, and they were walking with God, and God provided. Go do likewise. God bless you.